Welcome back to the episode. If you're new here, check out the first episode of the Devil's Brigade. You don't want to miss that. In this episode, we're going to be seeing the Canadian and the U.S. modern-day forces tried their best to do the training of the Devil's Brigade from 1942. They already did the training, so now they're going to be using it more for a practical exercise and getting out there and seeing what's actually like with the gear, with the weapons, and their thoughts and feelings on how that works for them. So let's take a look.
Let me know down there!
In combat, the first thing to die is often the plan. And on this mission, things have gone wrong from the start.
Hey, Albert, I got nothing. They're not moving anymore.
These men are Canadian and American soldiers on a training exercise in Montana. They're here to learn how to fight like the first unit of Special Forces troops did back in 1942. The Army called those men the 1st Special Service Force, but history remembers them as the Devil's Brigade. Summer, 1942. The Devil's Brigade arrives in Helena, Montana. The soldiers were a mixed group of Canadians and Americans. Some were outcasts from their regular units. Others had more ambition than brass-button Army life could satisfy.
They didn't like the Army. They didn't like officers. They didn't dislike our officers. Don't get me wrong. They disliked officers that we called rear echelon officers.
Within a few months, the training would turn the men into an aggressive hunter-killer unit who, in Churchill's words, would leave a trail of German corpses behind them.
Oh, it scared the hell out of them. They were just really scared of us.
The basic weapon of the Devil's Brigade was designed by a Canadian, John Garand. In fact, the Garand M1 became the standard rifle of the U.S. Army.
I had no idea that the Garand was actually a Canadian firearm, created by a Canadian. It's worldly renowned in World War II that it was fired by Americans. You see it in all the video games and the History channels, all that kind of stuff. It has that very... it has 8 rounds, and basically you hear that the expenditure of the magazine once it's basically empty, and it's very iconic for that noise. But I had no idea it was made by a Canadian, so it's very interesting to find that out.
The Garand was widely considered the most effective infantry rifle of the Second World War. A semi-automatic .30-06 with 8 rounds in the magazine. The clip ejected when the last round was fired. With a 24-inch barrel and weighing just over 9 pounds, the Garand was deadly to a range of 3,000 meters.
I liked the Garand very much. The idea of putting a clip of 8 bullets into that rifle and squeezing the trigger 8 times, but then after the 8th round was expelled, the block would stay open and you had to load quick another clip of ammunition to it and start firing away again.
The Mauser 98K was the German counterpart to the Garand. First adopted by the Wehrmacht in 1934, 14 million Mausers were used by the German Army. The bolt-action 5-round had a slower rate of fire than the Garand, but weighing just 8 pounds, it was lighter and easier to clean. With an attachable high-powered scope, the Mauser became the weapon of choice for German snipers.
Send it!
Chris Bird is one of the best shots in the unit.
Ready.
Send it! Okay, left. 2 right, correction, 2 right, and give me 3 more up.
The instructors think he has the potential to become a sniper.
Ready?
Set.
It's always fun working with the sniper within the Canadian Armed Forces. And we did a lot of training with the U.S. as well. We went all the way down to California. And during that time, we were basically re-simulating Afghanistan life because of the weather. And it was in a desert kind of climate, kind of the environment that we were kind of situated in. And it was always great to go out with them. So we decided to basically go up to them and be like, well, you know, like if we could use your rifles, would you like to use our C4? And they're like, yeah. So we got a chance. We got up to the mountains and we were able to fire off the 506, the 338, the 308, and the 50 cal. Excuse me. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great day of shooting, and I was able to get like a target at about 1.7 kilometers. I didn't know I actually hit the target, but my spar beside me said that I did, and it was always like kind of fun to tell that story. But they had a great time. After the range was done, we did another range of demolition, so we got to do C4 and det core and all that kind of stuff, and basically show them how to plant a charge, how to use it, what the different kind of ways you could also use a charge as well. And it was a lot of fun to learn from one another.
Send it.
It'd probably be a year or so before I would say anything, because to recommend him forward. But if he maintained that, we got him out and did some more skill sets, got him to see how he handled situations, put a little stress on him, deprived of sleep, put him out for 3 or 4 days working, carrying and bouncing, just going different missions, and just see how he handled the stress for about 3, 4, 5 days. If he handled that, we recommended forward.
Right off to the right.
Chris can hit a target on the range, but he's never fired in combat. And a sniper must be willing to do the unthinkable and then do it again.
Everybody will shoot once, but will they shoot a second and third time? Can they live with that fact? When we were taught, if you see a young child walking across a bridge at 10 o'clock in the morning and your orders are that no one should cross that bridge, what should you feel? And the proper answer was recoil, because no one crosses.
Recoil. The men of the Devil's Brigade may not have agreed, but they would have understood.
Another hit on the triangle.
I think it was Eric Blair. You know, his pen name was George Orwell. Right? He said that, I'm paraphrasing, but we sleep soundly at night because rough men stand ready to do violence on our behalf. So that's a key part of being a soldier. You have to be ready to you have to be ready to take another person's life. And of course, there's nothing morally wrong with a soldier doing his job.
Most of these soldiers have taken leave from their units to do this training. This is their vacation. They've come out of respect for the men who ran this course a lifetime ago. But they've also come to test themselves. Scott Young, a Canadian private from the Queen's York Rangers, has pushed himself too hard.
I slid down the rope too fast. Well, I climbed up, right? And then I went down, and I guess I went too fast, and I didn't feel that, I don't know, I didn't know that I was hurt until I was at the bottom. And yeah, I looked at my hand, and it was bleeding all over the place, and yeah.
The brigade was ruthless in cutting men who missed training. Even a small injury like this meant a ticket home.
That was always the fear within any type of training situation, is that you're going to be doing it, like you could be experiencing like months or even weeks of training, you get injured, and then you have to be recourse. It's always the worst feeling for any soldier to ever have to experience, because the last thing you want to do is not carry all the way through the graduation with your buddies and then restart the course again. If you're lucky to do it that year, I know that there's a lot of courses that only happen once a year, and if you're lucky enough to even be selected to go on those courses, that's your only opportunity to actually like further advance your career to what you want to achieve within the boundaries of the Canadian Forces or the American Forces. So to see that is really unfortunate. I believe the Queen's Rangers is a infantry detachment and reservists as well. So they get some opportunities here and there. They can do a little bit of extra training and actually have some fun out there.
2 months after pitching their first tent, 259 Canadian officers and men had been returned to their units, almost half their original number. Many went home on stretchers.
It didn't matter who you were. If you had broke a leg or broke an arm or something, you were gone. Our commanding officer, Colonel McQueen, he was a great guy. And he made his first jump and broke his leg. Well, that was the end of him. By the time you would have healed, the training was gone. It was on to something else.
Scott's injury means he too will miss training, so the instructors have decided to send him home.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but, you know, it blows, because, like, I was so stupid for doing that. Like, I don't know. I'm pissed right now. I just, such a bad mood. I've been in a bad mood since it happened. It sucks. Very disappointed. I'm really disappointed that happened in the first place. You know, if I could turn back time and change it, I definitely would, because it really hasn't, I don't know, it's really been a big disappointment. That's about it. So I don't know how I'm gonna go get my other stuff, and I'll see you guys later.
As the summer of 1943 wore on, the Devil's Brigade, created to destroy the Nazi heavy water project, a mission cancelled at the last minute, spent its days keeping fit and doing public relations. Although the men had developed a strong affection for Helena, where many would settle after the war, explaining the flamethrower to housewives was not what they'd signed up for.
And I'm sure that our commanding officer was afraid that if he didn't find us something for us to do, we would, you know, we'd lose it. We'd lose the esprit de corps, we'd lose the desire, etc. He had to find something for us to do.
But matters would take a life of their own, courtesy of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Following their victory at Pearl Harbor, Japan expanded aggressively across the Pacific, sending occupation forces as far west as the Aleutian Islands, off the coast of Alaska. As this Japanese newsreel shows, the next stop was San Francisco. These Japanese commandos were the first invaders to set foot on American soil since Canadians did in the War of 1812.
I still think that's really, like, wild. I'm pretty much up on Canadian history and a little bit of American history because we're so close together within our nations. But to hear about, like, how Japan basically assaulted the USA from Alaska, like, I don't remember reading that in the history books at all. Just absolutely, like, incredible that that's happened. But obviously they didn't last very long.
The occupation of the Aleutians was a propaganda victory for Tokyo and a humiliation for Washington. The Devil's Brigade was ordered to get them back. Allied intelligence estimated as many as 12,000 Japanese troops held the main island of Kiska. With the memory of the bloody battle at Guadalcanal on their minds, the brigade expected a fight to the death.
And we were quite prepared that we would lose a lot of people if the Japanese put up the same kind of fight.
At the spearhead of the invasion, the Devil's Brigade 1st Regiment led the assault in an armada of rubber boats, while the 2nd Regiment, the airborne unit, waited nervously.
The 2nd Regiment was to make a parachute jump onto Kiska in support of the seaborne landing. And I was in the 2nd Regiment, so we prepared for the jump. We got on the planes around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the dawn and the call to come.
So we paddled ashore and in the dark, and strangely enough, just before we got to the shore, the moon came out. The first time we'd seen it in about 2 weeks up there, and it displayed a whole lot of rubber boats if somebody was looking.
We were really sitting ducks most of the time on the water. And on the way up, we passed a Japanese machine gun position which had been vacated. And I thought as we went by it, thank God there isn't a Japanese machine gunner in there because we'd all be dead.
The only enemy soldiers the men came across were casualties of the naval bombardment. After all those months of training, the Devil's Brigade took Kiska without firing a shot. The Japanese were gone, leaving still warm coffee and boxes of weather equipment.
Makes you wonder, like, who tipped them off, if anything. And thankfully, when the Canadians went like ashore there was no nest up in the mountains or up in the hills there to cut them back. But like when you're leaving like all this camera equipment behind and things like that, like there must have been something going on that was a higher priority than trying to take over Alaska. So maybe that was because they got word that the U.S. was planning the atom bomb maybe at that time and they wanted reinforcements. Who knows? But it's very interesting that they left so abruptly and got out of there.
The call came that the Japs had gone and we did not need to make this jump, which was very good news because I pictured myself floating around in the cold Bering Sea.
Once the beachhead had been secured, other units came ashore. Less well-trained and expecting to find an enemy behind every rock, they fired on themselves.
That first night after we were relieved, we had pitched our pup tents and were trying to get to sleep, and we heard all this machine gun fire all night long, and you know, it was dark and foggy, and these guys up above that had taken over from us were just trigger happy. They were shooting their own people. I counted 13 corpses come down the next morning, but there were a lot more than that.
32 men died on Kiska, victims of friendly fire. The Devil's Brigade took no casualties, but lessons were learned.
What I took away from Kiska was that no matter how careful the planning is, there's always the unexpected.
Although the unit was still not bloodied, the Kiska adventure served the men well. In the months to come, they would meet an enemy who would not cut and run, but would engage the brigade in some of the bloodiest combat of the Second World War. "10 days into training, and the squad has moved from the base to the bush. The instructors hope a few nights under the stars will help the team come together. So they've laid on a meal of Montana elk. There are two things guaranteed to get all soldiers talking, and one of them is food.
My favorite meal was it wasn't basic training, we already were in advanced infantry training. All I remember is it was a little chilly, but it was just downpour. And we had eggs and everything, and it was great. But when your tray starts filling up with water and you try and eat it sitting under a tree shivering, that was about my best one.
The best one I can think of is, it was in the field for us, but it was in the home of an Afghanistan local. And it was goat and rice and flatbread and tea. It was pretty good. I've also had goat at a different place, which was total opposite. Gamey, disgusting. My hands smelled like goat for 6 days, no matter how much I washed them. But this one time I went, they actually prepared it real nice with the spices and everything. It was good.
Living off the land is all part of Special Forces training. But for the men of the brigade, cooking bushmeat over an open fire was nothing special.
Always found that interesting because when serving, they never taught you how to prepare wild game. They never taught you how to trap wild game, things like that. And it's just something that shouldn't be forgotten when you're training as a soldier, because you could be always left alone. Your section or team might be all like, they may get hurt or pass away, that kind of stuff. And they just never taught you how to hunt for elk or hunt for deer or hunt for rabbit with snares and stuff like that. They taught you how to protect yourself, survive, create a tent, create a fire, some really basic survival skills, if that. And of course, there's different variations as you go through different types of training, like jungle warfare, winter warfare, that kind of stuff. But they never taught you how to like gut a deer, prepare it, like what temperature the meat should be at, like just as a cooking example. And I think it's really important to keep that tradition alive, because it's just so dumb that people today still think that food comes only from a grocery store. That drives me nuts, especially here in Canada, like when you're near Toronto and things like that. A lot of people aren't really surrounded by hunters in their family. A lot of them don't have firearms that are meant for hunting. And that's almost like a lost art, if anything. And a lot more of the hunting is up more in like northern Canada, and those traditions still keep on going forward, that kind of stuff. But it's something that the government should ensure that that's still inside the training. So that's just my opinion. Love to know yours down in the comments down below.
They were looking for individuals that had experience being on their own under unfamiliar circumstances.
For people who had outdoor experience, ranchers, trappers, prospectors, woodsmen,
hard rock miners, they were looking for individualistic people who were outdoors people.
These men are also tough soldiers. They can handle hard work. But soldiers need leadership. And in this group, leadership is lacking. Joe George is the only officer in the unit.
Some of these things that we're learning are skills that aren't taught in a modern army. You know, we depend a lot on technology. We depend a lot on our GPS, on our aircraft for insertions, on our Humvees for moving around, and we don't spend a lot of time just out, light infantry on the ground, moving from one place to another, and I think that hurts us.
Open up a vein.
Joe is a lieutenant in the National Guard who fought in Iraq before coming home to teach economics. The instructors are not sure he's the right man to lead the group. Jay Budd, however, has caught their eye. A third-generation Green Beret, Jay has no doubts he'd have made it in the force.
Yes. Pretty confident about that, yes. Still a soldier, doesn't matter. I'm a soldier in 2006 or 1942. I think it's in my blood to be a soldier.
Leadership was never an issue in the Devil's Brigade, as all the officers led from the front. Colonel Robert Frederick, the man who built the unit, was wounded 9 times.
The officers did not hold their rank, nor did the NCOs, because of any service time or any pull or anything else. They all had to earn it. The officers went on the route marches with us, carried the packs, got wet and cold, and still led from the front.
Like the obstacle course 3 times a day.
Tomorrow, these soldiers will face the most dangerous part of their training. They're going mountain climbing. To do it safely, they'll have to work together. A cliff face is no place for debate. The 1st Special Service Force was trained to fight anytime, anywhere. And hanging from the side of a mountain was all part of preparing for the unexpected.
They'd find us a nice cliff, and we had skilled instructors, and we'd learn how to claw our way up and then belay down again.
The mountain climbing actually was a little scarier to me than the parachuting, because you're learning how to rappel down cliffs and climb places that didn't look like they could be climbed.
Most of these soldiers do know how to climb, but none have climbed under fire.
In the case of a unit this size, they're going to have to identify who's the best climbers and who's got the strongest back to carry the supplies. But that you're going to have to switch out those positions, because that lead climber is going to get tired after a while. So everybody needs to know how to do this, because you never know when you're going to be put in that position where you need to go up and, scramble through the rocks.
When the Devil's Brigade trained here, the men knew if they couldn't make it up cliffs like this, they were out. These soldiers are also climbing under pressure. The instructors have told them they'll cut any man who can't scale this face.
Go, young blood.
I remember like during the earlier years being at the unit that we had like this massive facility, and it was great. It had like a rock climbing wall. We had arm combat, like simulation, like knives and pistols and all that kind of stuff, and mats and things for sparring. And I remember being there. I think I was probably like 20 years old at the time. And I'd be like, well, why can't we just use this stuff? Can we get somebody in here to teach us this stuff? Because as a combat engineer, you're not really used to that kind of thing. It's not like the infantry where they kind of like rely on them to be that tip of the spear and know all those different techniques. Like we were more specialized in like demolition, construction, ordnance, UXOs, like bomb making materials, all that kind of stuff. The kind of like minefields, and but like. If you're working with the infantry, it'd be nice to know those certain skills. So we did have like a rock climbing wall, but we never got the opportunity to actually use it as much as I wanted to. Yes, we did rappelling in the U.S., things like that, and learn those special skills. But it was really frustrating that they didn't have instructors who were qualified to just teach guys who just have nothing else better to do all day and just be on their phones. And that was always drove me crazy with that low time where everybody was in the cage of the breezeway. And I remember one time I hit my shoulder and like a bunch of dust came off of me because it felt like we were just an ornament just sitting there waiting to be told what to do and when to do it. So anyways, if anything was to change today, hopefully they'll learn from this and like get guys on the tools and get them ready to go.
Woo! Rest is easy.
Just stick your hands in far and
Easy is not a word Brian Haynes would choose.
I have a very, very bad fear of heights. I don't know, it's just, some people are afraid of spiders, some are afraid of snakes, some are afraid of heights.
Give him some slack.
No, I'm sorry, as you were. Tension.
Haynes is a drill sergeant in the U.S. Army who's been in many high-stress situations, but few like this.
I feel like every time I move my feet, I feel like I'm going to fall.
Push with your legs. Push yourself. You got it.
Tension! Every time I jump out of an airplane or rappel or climb, it's overcoming that fear of heights. That's part of the reason I have such a hard time climbing is committing myself to, moving. It's very hard to move when you're afraid. Tension!
Brian, you're right.
Hey, tension, I'm falling!
I didn't like it. It frightened me. Climbing was, parachute jumping never bothered me, but the rock climbing I found scary as hell. I could visualize myself lying at the bottom of the hill with my head split open.
Tension.
Now get to your feet. You're doing good, man.
Tension.
60 feet up, Brian Haynes knows the feeling.
There you go.
Tension.
Good job. Good job, bud. All right, Brian. Good job, big man. Woo! Good job.
I learned most of my climbing skills and rappelling after getting out of the forces because I was working for an organization that specialized in confined space rescue as well as high angle rescue. So you got to learn like all the different types of ropes and like different kind of gear that you needed in order to recover somebody or like get them out of a certain situation. As if, let's say the person fell off this cliff, you were able to put them on a stretcher and get them up over the cliff, or like high angle rescue situations on buildings, or even as high as a crane is a best example. And those are like stories, like 30 stories, 40 stories, 60 stories up, very scary situations, lots of high velocity wind. But like that's where I learned more of my climbing than I ever did within the forces.
Nice one. I don't know what techniques I use to overcome my fear. I just do it. You just kind of reach down inside yourself and say, no matter what, I'm going forward.
Assaulting a cliff face in wartime takes more than courage. It takes careful planning. Who carries the water, the extra ammo, the machine gun? How will the wounded get down? And where are the enemy sentries?
They had scouts which they relied on to go ahead and scout out the battlefield. And I'm sure that they identified the best climbers in the group, and they sent those people out as the lead climber.
Chris Bird is everyone's choice for lead climber in this group. He's the type of soldier who'd have been at home in the brigade. Strong, agile, but most of all, Chris is fearless.
Good job, Chris. It's actually the first time I've actually climbed a rock or a face like this. Attention! The only other practice or experience I've ever had was on a climbing wall in Regina, which is pretty flat terrain.
In 1942, lead climbers had no second chances. Chris does. He has one small safety rope.
I think most of the difficulty was in the mental aspect of it, the idea of going up the hill with no protection immediately.
You mean the fear?
The concern. You take your steps a little bit slower. You make sure you tie the knots properly.
Chris, Brian, and the others all made it up this cliff, but most had to fight for every inch. When the brigade climbed here, each man carried his rifle, his water, and a 60-pound combat pack.
I think it's part and parcel of the whole package, you know, the training package. It's kind of all integrated together, and the end product just comes out as a guy who'll do anything he's told to do and do it well.
Friends, hopefully you liked the episode as much as I did. Check out the next episode right here. Don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below. There's been a lot of great comments over the last couple episodes, so I can't wait to see you guys in the comments there. Take care. I'll see you on the next one.